In this video, I'm going to show you mixed media tools and techniques of combining drawing and painting materials to create something expressive and unique. Mixed media is a great way to improve your art skills and also explore stunning color. So let's talk about the common challenges that a lot of artists face when trying to incorporate new materials or techniques into their artwork and their process. First of all, many of us tend to stick to what we know, using just pencils or just paints. You may worry about how to layer them without making a mess, or perhaps you're just unsure about which materials work well together. Plus, there's the ever-present fear of ruining your artwork when you're in there experimenting with something new, and you're not alone in feeling this way. So let's take a look at the paper, the pencils, the paints, the chalks, and the techniques that I have found have worked best for me and for my students. This tutorial was taken from my new Patreon course called Colorful Mixed Media Portraits. In this video, we're going to be talking about working with our mixed media tools, which means it's a variety of tools. Now, I realize the scene that I have created here looks pretty overwhelming and probably quite intimidating to those of you that haven't done this before, but I just want to qualify this before I start. What I've created here are different piles of different types of mixed media tools. In other words, I've got my brushes, I've got some white chalks, I've got various different colored pencils, I've got my pastels, I've got shavings, I've got sanding papers, and I've got different brand names here as well. What you do is you start somewhere and then over time you build it up. So it isn't a matter of running out and buying a bunch of materials that you don't know about. What you do is you just build up gradually. And if you like it, then you go and you buy a set, or you buy more of these things, and you begin to figure out what really works for you. So let's start with the paper that we even use, like just developing our surface. So what I like to use is watercolor paper, and this is by Arches, and it's 300-pound hot pressed watercolor paper. And you can see, like, this paper is really thick. It's literally like a cardboard. It's very sturdy, it's very stable, and it can really take a beating. That's why I like it a lot, particularly when dealing with these mixed media, because you're wetting the paper, you're blending on it, you're putting brushes on it, you're scrubbing it, you're erasing it, you're doing all kinds of things. And if the paper is not stable and sturdy, it'll break down pretty fast. So this is why for mixed media, I really like this kind of paper. What you do with it, you can do anything. Okay, in terms of being able to turn it into any kind of a colored environment is totally up to you. And what I use to stain the paper, my favorite medium is actually just using acrylic paint. Now, here's 3 different brands that I use. They're all good brands. You don't have to run out and buy any specific brand. This is Winsor Newton, I've got Golden, which are excellent, and then Liquitex. Those are the 3 that I tend to buy. And you're going to get good light fastness, you know, rich colors, great pigments, all that kind of stuff. And when you look, if you want to know how to apply these to the material here, I'm going to send you over at the end to another video on paper preparation, and you'll be able to see that. And how you make that is up to you. You know, it's whatever you want. So these are just examples of, you know, the paper that I have, and I just stretch it on the board. I quite often will, when I buy this paper, it is 22 by 30 inches. So it's a nice big sheet of paper, but I don't usually use the whole sheet of paper very often. So, you know, I'll just score it and rip off the part that I need. And then I have leftover pieces. And so I never, ever, ever throw any of those pieces away, no matter how small, because you can use them for smaller pieces of artwork to do, but also as testers. And you can see here that this is a tester for some mixed media pieces that I did, where I was doing the same thing. I was trying to work out the background colors, the combination of how I wanted to work with my colored pencils. I ended up using gold leaf on here. I was going to be using charcoal. And so I was really experimenting with what I wanted to end up using. So when I say hot pressed watercolor paper, for those of you that are not familiar with that, watercolor paper comes in 2 different standards, shall we say, hot pressed and cold pressed. The cold pressed usually has a more textured surface, and the hot pressed, it's almost like they've ironed it. They've pressed it in a hot press, and what that does is it smooths out any of the little bumps, just like if you were to iron fabric, and you end up with this beautiful, super smooth lovely surface to work on if you want to be working on very fine drawing like this, where you want a nice finish. So if you're just doing watercolors and loose pastels and all that sort of thing, it doesn't really matter. But if you want to do fine detail, you really need to go with a hot pressed paper. So there's a tendency to want to run out to save money, to go and get perhaps a 90-pound or a 140-pound watercolor paper. I caution you against that because I've tried it. All of us sort of, wanted to go out there and try and do this on a budget. And what ends up happening is that the amount of layering that it takes to build up your background, it can be a significant number of layers. You can get anywhere from 3 to 7 layers. It's not unusual. But every time you wet this paper, it's going to expand, and then it has to contract in order to, when you're drying it. But when it expands, it creates like kind of this ripple effect. And if the paper is not thick and sturdy like this, it will ripple a lot. And what ends up happening is that you cannot control where your washes go. That's the problem. So if you want to do your testers on the thinner, cheaper paper, that's fine. But when you're working on your finished piece, you really want to work with the heavier paper. Otherwise, you'll just be so frustrated with trying to control it. And so that's just something to remember when you go out and buy your paper. These are my favorite drawing colored pencils. And the distinction of them is that they are watercolor pencils, not regular colored pencils. Regular colored pencils, the material, the binder that's in the lead itself is kind of waxy. It makes it a bit sticky. And so they don't blend great, simply because they weren't really meant to do that. And these watercolor pencils, the material that they're made of is like the same as like a little watercolor cake that you would see in those little sets. It's watercolor that's been hardened, and whatever the binder is, it allows the medium here to crumble, basically. And so when you're working with it, it draws very well. So I'll just do something here. Very blendable, but it has a somewhat sort of dry, powdery nature to it. And so it allows you to actually blend these pencils together, and that's the beauty of it. So when I'm working with these, I like to blend my materials. What I use to blend them are this. These are my blending brushes. These are drawing brushes, not painting brushes. I mean, yes, they are paint brushes, but I buy them specifically to do my drawing. And I have 2 different kinds. I have ones like this, and this is a hog's hair brush. And what's great about a hog's hair brush, it's a little stiffer and allows you to get in there and really move your material around. Build my colors up in layers and then just kind of keep working on them. So the second group of watercolor pencils that I like to work with is by Pastel. And they do very, very good quality materials as well. They're very popular. And what you're looking for the watercolor ones are called Albrecht Dürer. That's the brand or the name that they've given their watercolor pencils that are very good quality. These are like professional artist quality, and they're very good as well. But the only thing I find about them is that they are like the shaft of the pencil is thicker than the Staedtler ones. So I have to use a different kind of pencil extender. I have to use one of these kinds, which is more of a flexible opening because it has the screw top to it. So that's the only thing that I find, is that you have to have different kinds of pencil extenders in order to deal with these. And the reason I like these and I buy them is because you can get them as singles. So you can see, so what I have here are mostly work with the skin tones. And so I just focus on the colors that are important for me. It just saves me a lot of money. So the next group of pencils that I have here are actually pastel pencils, which I love as well. The ones that I like the best are called Stabilo Carbothello. These are great pencils. I really love them. You can see you can get some beautiful colors with them. And these allow you to actually blend as well. But it's a different quality of blending. So I notice I use different types of pencils at different points. I usually use these pastel pencils near the end of the drawing to do some finishing touches. That's usually how they end up going. So I find when I'm using my pencils, I will generally start off with something like a Staedtler, which is very, very fine, to get the really detailed work. Or if I'll work with my favorite Pastel, that's all that I have. And then I'll move up to my pastel pencils. So I move up to the softer, rougher
mediums as the drawing progresses. Such as in a piece like this, all of these are very, very fine. So I'll work with the finer materials in here. I also get into my white chalks, and then I get into my charcoals and things. And then in these looser areas, I'll get more into the pastels. I'll add those on, and I can even work the backgrounds and all that sort of thing. So the less important details, I use the softer, rougher mediums, such as the pastel itself, the chalk pastel, whether it's in a pencil or in a pastel crayon, it doesn't matter, but I use these ones where I have the most control. So let's get into talking about the white highlight chalks here. And you can see there's been quite a bit of it on this particular drawing. So the one that I like the most, we go back to the Stabilo Carbothello. This is really a great highlight chalk. I don't know what it is that they have as a binder in this particular white chalk, but it has really great coverage. And when you blend it, it blends beautifully and it allows you to build up your whites. As in, you can see here, this is whiter, there's highlights there, there's a little highlight there. It allows you to have that nuance of gradation that you don't necessarily get with some of these other ones. It gets really frustrating, actually. So the Stabilo Carbothello are really, really great for white highlights in your drawings. And you'll notice here that they have their own set of brushes just for the whites. But in other words, I don't pick up a brush that's got color in it to work with my lights at all. I only keep I have a big brush and a small brush for my whites, and that's all I use it for, is blending my white chalk. Then, these are all little bits of the same thing. There's this thing, and this is by Watercolor. And this is an artist stick, is that they have a particular binder to them as well. There's something about them that makes them, they are spreadable, but they are at the same time sticky enough that you can build up an actual white highlight on top of this thing, and it'll actually stay on the paper, and you can build up to a bright white. And so I don't use it a lot, but I do use it for my little spectral highlights and the real highlights in various points. This is a case in point right here, right on the end of the nose, maybe along the lip, and then the white of the eyes, and maybe some of the highlights right there, where it needs to be bright, bright white. And what I do is that you have to be careful with them, because if you drop them, they'll definitely break. So I will take a piece and then I will start to sharpen it down. There's another one there which I've sharpened down, so I can get in here and just work with that highlight like that. It actually stays, and then I can get in there with my little brush, and then I can just blend it. So we have a number of different charcoals that you can use. So this, to start with, for the hardest and the most delicate, this is a carbon pencil, and this is by Wolf's. So it's Wolf's carbon pencils. They come in different hardnesses, anywhere from a B to a 6B. And a B is very hard and very sharp, and it allows you to do very delicate work. And you can work up to a much softer one, which it becomes, much darker. As in with this piece here, her hair and her eyes are completely done with charcoal. And the charcoal is done with two different things. You can work with these things here, and this is called nitrum. These are nitrum charcoal sticks. They come in various hardnesses as well. These are great material. They're very nice to work with. Also, just the way that these things are, these long, sharp sort of working tool, you can get in there and do some very, very delicate work. This is really great. And you get in there and you can also blend this with your brushes. Again, you have to have separate brushes for your charcoal, for sure. You can't be working with this with other things. It will just totally contaminate it. So if I were to take this brush and go into the face, I would just make a big black smudge. So you can't do that. You've got to work within the particular color group that you're working with your brushes. So this one I can put down and I can just blend it with my brush. And then you can get into your charcoal pencils, which are by General's charcoal pencils. These are really great too. And they have hard, soft, and medium. And depending on what you're trying to do, you're going to work with that. If I'm trying to get these delicate little tendrils like this, the harder really great, okay? If I'm trying to get a lot of coverage, like in the hair like this, then I'm going to use one of the soft. So I could just get in there and make a lot of coverage like this, and then I'm going to use my brush to blend, and you can make pretty fast work of all of this. And you can get these really punchy blacks and really get in there and do some great work. So let's talk about when you're working with your tools here. You can see here I have these little trays, and then I have this as well. So what these are pieces of sandpaper, and they're about 150 grit. You don't want 80 grit, which is like too coarse, because then it'll just end up shredding your pencil tips. And if you end up getting something like 300 or 400 grit, it's so fine you'll be sitting there sharpening all day. So what you have is that you use this kind of medium grit sandpaper to sharpen your pencils. And what you want to be careful, and that's what I keep these things for. These are just little dollar store paint trays you get for your kids. But what I do is I like to keep my shavings of all these different pigments. I can always go back in with my brushes if I need to and pick something up and then do some blending with it. And it works actually really, really great. So when you're sharpening your pencils, so you're doing this, you want to make sure that you pick a little spot in your sandpaper and sort of keep it to that color. Like, I don't want to be sharpening the red where the purple is, or where the black is, or any of these other colors, or the blue or something, because it'll contaminate the colors. So just try and keep your colors in the same area. When I'm finished, I simply go in and I just scrape the powder off into my little tray, and I keep my color groups together. Am I all picky about every single shade? No, I just try and keep my color groups together so that I can pick up something like that and then just go in and I can blend with that. And I've done the same thing here with my charcoal. And then finally, I'm going to talk about using pastel sticks. So what we're doing is we're going from the finest and the most delicate to then we get into our pastel pencils, and then we can get into our pastel sticks. This brand that I use are fantastic. These are Rembrandt pastels. They too can be expensive, but you can also buy them in very small sets and singles as well. So that's what makes them really great. What I like to use these colors are so vibrant and rich. They're just fantastic. So let's just take a background here. So let's say I want to work that background in that color, and then I can just get in there and just, So you can see the coverage is fantastic. And quite often what I'll do with those pastels is I'll just use a little rag for in the studio. So this is a very soft rag. I used old t-shirts, old undershirts, things like that. They're very soft. They've been laundered a million times, so they're very good that way. And quite often I'll just use this and I'll just rub it with my fingers. So you can see the incredible impact and vibrancy of these particular materials, particularly if you put them on a beautiful background as well. And what I like about these is that you can begin to mix not only your colors and all that kind of stuff, but you can begin to mix your marks as well. So you can have all this delicate work in one area of the drawing and then get into this beautiful sort of loose, expressive work in other areas. And the two kinds that I end up using, like I said, are Rembrandt, and then there's another one here called New Pastel. These are by Prismacolor, and it's called New Pastel, and they're really good as well. So let's go over here somewhere. And they're good quality. So you can get these really, really beautiful, rich colors. You don't like that, you go back over it. And this is where it starts becoming extremely expressive and fun. This is why this whole medium, when I'm working with my students, everybody loves it. So that's showing you some of the things that you can do with this medium. All kinds of goodies. And I hope that helped and gave you a few ideas of what's possible with this particular set of mediums and techniques.
And if you would like to develop the skills to create beautiful and realistic portraits, you can. Simply go to the Patreon link at the end of this video and find out how. And if you would like to know about the specific materials that I use in this video, simply go to the links that are provided in the description below. And remember, mixed media is really about freedom, creativity, and the opportunity to explore and let your imagination run wild. That's the beauty of it and what makes it a lot of fun. So I'd love to hear from you and find out what your favorite mixed media techniques are. Please feel free to share your experiences, or if you have any questions, in the comments below. And if you're looking for more tips and inspiration, hit that subscribe button for more transformational art videos coming your way. And until next time, stay creative. This is your time to express yourself. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.